Hello, guys. This is the Crypto Sheikhs Podcast. We're here for another episode talking about crypto, blockchain, NFTs. I'm your co-host, Anas Burton. I'm here with my main man, Danosh Big D. How's it going, my man?
All good, all good. Straight from Dubai. We're here with Edmund McCormack out of DC. It's great to have a new guest from the United States on the show. It's not every day we have a US guest on the show, so very welcome to the show, Eddie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure.
This is the Crypto Sheikhs. This is the leading podcast in Dubai and the UAE, where you, regardless of your skill level, will learn everything from cryptocurrencies to blockchain technologies.
So a quick intro, Edmund McCormack here. He is a fund manager. He runs his own blockchain fund out of the US. But he also has a very interesting education platform called DChained. We're here to sort of talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about his philosophy around crypto investing, a little bit into some of the other use cases beyond crypto for blockchain, which I think is very interesting, something we haven't really explored on our podcast just yet. And of course, we can't end an episode without something on NFTs. But in this particular kind of scenario, he's got something outside the art space, which I think is really exciting, especially for me, because well, you'll find out why when we get to that. So let's start with you, Edmund. I mean, we've been looking at your background. You got a pretty interesting background. You've got a sort of a tech background. You worked at Facebook. You worked at MySpace. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you started and how you sort of ended up in the crypto space.
Yeah, I'm a tech geek. Started out years ago, about 15 years ago, starting out at MySpace at that time. At that point, many people who might be listening remember MySpace. It was a pretty big website at that point. It was really one of the only social networks at that stage. Facebook was still pretty much in its infancy. Funny enough, when I was in college back in 2002, I hate to say that because I aged myself pretty bad.
Don't worry.
I have Benjamin Button syndrome. I look young because I moisturize, but other than that, but I remember Facebook rolling out. Yeah, moisturize, and usually I'll do some voodoo as well, just to make sure I look good. When the cameras go off, it just goes downhill quick. But anyway, yeah, starting out at MySpace, it was, for me, I was using it. I had actually, by the time I joined MySpace in 2007, I was fully over at Facebook. But I liked the idea that it was built around the music scene. I'm big into music. I love seeing, live events, and that was really their MO. And
yeah,
shortly after that, headed over to Apple for a number of years, helped launch a number of different products. So when I went over there, the App Store was pretty new and they were looking for ways to help developers make money. We then launched Apple Music and Apple News, which was fun, stressful, exciting, and subsequently made my way over to launching a education platform for crypto, which really was focused around just teaching everyday people. So not people in the finance world or in the tech community, but just your average next door neighbor, what the hell blockchain is. And that's really, has been something of a passion project of mine. I've been involved in crypto for coming up on 10 years. Actually, it's October now, 10 years,
wow.
October of 2011. So, it's something I've seen mature over the ages to sort of go from being this marketplace in the shadows. Won't talk about that because I think we're past those days.
Yeah, we're past those days.
But and ultimately, seeing how not only everyday investors are getting excited, but how actual businesses are sort of jumping on board and using this technology in a way that reminds me very much of companies that jumped on board with the internet back in the late 90s, the Amazons and Googles, to create products and services that just simply weren't possible with technology before. So it's been a hell of a ride. As you mentioned, I oversee my own fund. So, in that sense, I've moved, more into the finance sector, but, leveraging a lot of my experience and connections in the tech world with some of the different certifications I have. I'm investment advisor here in the US, also have my broker dealer. So certainly, leveraging that financial background as well.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Amazing.
So you go 10 years back into crypto. I mean, there's not a lot of people that have their first interaction with crypto 10 years ago. So what was your first interaction with crypto?
So when I tell people how so at that point, it was just Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the only, I think Litecoin was just coming out around that time, but it was 99% Bitcoin. And to buy Bitcoin, people don't really believe it nowadays. But here in the US, what you had to do was you had to go to a drugstore, find the Western Union at that drugstore, send money overseas, and ask, that account overseas would then credit an account for me in Mt. Gox in Japan. And I had to, thinking back how funny this must have been. I walk into a drugstore. Now, for some of your listeners might not see, but I'm a svelte redhead gentleman. For me to walk in there and give names of some very foreign recipients, and they're like, "Really, dude?" And I was like, "No, yeah, I know."
Especially at a drugstore.
They're like, I don't think so. So that's how you had to fund it. I had to send money cash overseas to Philippines and have someone in the Philippines credit me in a marketplace in Japan. It was just
Just for the benefit of the audience.
Wow.
Mt. Gox is a very famous exchange that was actually founded by Jed McCaleb, who founded, strangely enough, Ripple, as well as Stellar Lumens, two incredible crypto companies now. But Mt. Gox famously was one of the bigger exchanges at the time that effectively collapsed after a huge hack hit them. Question to you: were you a victim of that hack, which happened ages ago?
I was not. I wish I was, in a sense, so I could say that, I held on and, I was chicken. 6 months after I bought in October, so call it March, April of 2012, there was a lot of talk with the Department of Justice here in the US, and they were going nuts. And I wound up selling. At that point, I made like a 7-8x, and I was like, what?
Nice.
I'm going to take my money. I'll take my money. And I think I actually dislocated my shoulder from patting myself on the back so hard for that kind of return. And nowadays, when I look back and I realize it was like $90 was the price of Bitcoin when I sold. And
so you bought Bitcoin at close to $10 and then sold it at 90.
Mm-hmm.
That is, that is a Chad move.
Well, I mean, Chad, I look like a Chad, but no, the 7-8, I mean, there was no, at that point, there was no precedent for that.
Yeah,
you go to the
exactly.
stock market and you're like, you make a 10x, you make a 10% return annually. You're like, I'm a great investor. At that point, I was like, this is going to collapse. I'm taking my money, and hopefully this check cashes when I bring it to the bank.
So what got you interested in Bitcoin to begin with? I mean, and where did you hear about it?
Yeah, so
it was mostly on forums and things like that.
And it was, so coincidentally, I was at a work trip. I was, at the point I was living in New York, I was out in California, and I was sitting down with a few of our engineers on my team at Apple, and they were talking about blockchain technology. And ultimately, they were sort of debating on whether it's actually scalable. There was a lot of pessimism among them because people don't realize that the idea of, well, at that point for Bitcoin, it was proof of work. Proof of work is not new. Bitcoin didn't invent proof of work. Proof of work, right, it existed for years. In fact, Cambridge University came out with a white paper because they were testing proof of work to see, is this something that could help stop spam email? And they realized very quickly that, as they ultimately are looking for a proof of work, so there's a concerted effort being taken by the sender, those people who want to try and work the system would figure out, more complex ways as computers got more, advanced. And it wound up being that at some point it's going to become inhibitive for average people to now use email. so you can't use proof of work. So they were talking about that. And then the one thing that sort of stuck with me was they talked about.
Hold on, Edmund. Sorry to interject. I just want to note to the audience what proof of work is. So we've talked about this before, but proof of work is a consensus mechanism. What that means is it is a way for the blockchain network to stay effectively secure. There are many different types of ways that a blockchain, which is the infrastructure that underlies any crypto asset, there are many different ways in which you can have what's called consensus, which is what ensures security. Now, proof of work is one of those. There's also proof of stake. There's actually for Solana, which we've talked about before, there's proof of history, which is a bit more complicated. But proof of work is the way that mining sort of operates on the Bitcoin blockchain. You have to effectively solve a super hard math problem using a number of computers. And if you successfully solve that math problem, you get Bitcoin as a reward, right? And that is what's called a proof of work, because you've had to do a lot of work, mathematical work with these computers to find that effective answer to that solves that particular block. And then you get Bitcoin as a reward. So just wanted to say that, because I have no doubt there'll be people in the audience who will be thinking about that. Back to you, Edmund.
Yeah, and it's a great analogy. When I actually had to, my mother still has no idea what I do. 15 years into my career, has no clue. And I had to explain, I was like, imagine your credit card statement. And every time you swipe your credit card, that machine that you swipe sends out a message to 1 million accountants around the world. And those 1 million accountants are now in a competition. Who could verify that that transaction is accurate and then now add it to your American Express statement?
Yeah,
there's complexities in there, but it's like, and if they solve it first, they get a reward, and there's sort of incentive for them. So yeah, I think your analogy was fantastic. It's always interesting to sort of hear how it's broken down, because it's complex, but at the end of the day, most people don't need to really know sort of the back end. Most people, when they're listening to this podcast, don't know how the video is working, for me in the US and you in Dubai, but they just know that the video is there. So we'll get to that point.
They don't know how the internet is working and stuff everyone's using.
Exactly. So, but on that topic for the internet, I mean, answering your question for Bitcoin, they made a really good point, which is when we look at the internet, there's so many different standards that were created. There's a standard for how you register a domain name for the URL, standard for how email works, standard for even how video streaming works. But there was never a standard for how money needs to be sent and received. And it sort of was this clunky workaround. In fact, when PayPal was founded, one of the goals for Elon Musk and Peter Thiel at that point was to basically try to create what Bitcoin made. And ultimately they realized that it was just too frustrating trying to work with the financial system in the 90s. And they wound up, altering it to then become PayPal, what it is today. But
just on your point of Peter Thiel, anybody ever want to read a great book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel? He actually talks about what you're talking about, which is creating a digital form of the dollar. Well, a digital currency that replaces, amazing. One of the finest books I've ever read. I love that you referenced that, because when I read it, I remember him talking about we want to create a currency that effectively replaces the US dollar. And I read this in more of the crypto era. I was thinking, wow, these guys were really thinking really forward, and now we live in this Bitcoin era where this is kind of normal. But to write that back then must have been incredibly revolutionary.
Can we pause for 1 second?
Sure.
Yeah, so you were saying about Peter Thiel and how that was a precursor to your ideas on Bitcoin. Great topic there. Sorry, I cut you off there, Edmund.
Yeah, and ultimately that's sort of what got things spinning in my head with this idea of basically a monetary standard for the internet, and sort of solving that problem, and kind of snowballed from there. And I've been in and out of crypto in different ways, both as a personal investor, investing in business, now launching an education platform, then a hedge fund. So it's something that I'm really excited about. And it's fascinating to see sort of these big name, tech entrepreneurs who, rather than launching companies now going through the traditional venture capital route in Silicon Valley or New York, they're deciding to sort of bypass that now and go direct to investors and sort of launch on blockchain, which is really exciting. And it's also somewhat validating as well that, we are on a path that there's probably no going back at this point.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us perfectly into, DChained. You talked about your interest in education in this sort of in the blockchain space. I thought maybe we could have a discussion about that. Why you're looking to build this and what it can bring in your view to people. I think firstly, I'm going to share my screen here so we can sort of walk through your website. This is the DChained website. I really like how you've also got all these guides, so that's very easy for people who are visiting to get sort of bite-sized ideas on some of the key things happening in the blockchain space. But yeah, over to you, Edmund. What's been the sort of background behind this?
Yeah, funny sort of catalyst was I lost my job at Apple. So I was on my honeymoon, second to last day, of the honeymoon. This is a trip of a lifetime. My wife and I are in Thailand. It's going great. 4:30 in the morning, my phone explodes. Tim Cook had just made an announcement that Apple was shutting down any service that tied or related to consumer data. So I was overseeing sort of two different teams, both of which had to do with consumer data. At that point, Apple Music was not, just a paid only service. There was an ad supported streaming element to it. Same thing with Apple News. So wound up, net realizing, wait a second, this could be something that could be much bigger than just what Apple thinks. And skip ahead a couple of months. And ultimately it really came to a head because on one side, we saw sort of the net effect with Cambridge Analytica and the US election. So Trump coming into office and all that drama. The other is we also saw this resurgence of interest in Bitcoin. Bitcoin just sort of come into its own from a price appreciation standpoint. And many people who were coming in for the first time. And these were people who really I wanted to build this education for because these were teachers, firemen, police officers, et cetera, people without that deep financial background. And while things were going really well for about 2 years, when the market started to turn and more of those people who were, sort of in the know got their money out, these were the people that got burned the most. And I quickly realized that one of the challenges that a lot of these people were facing was that while there's no lack of information out there on crypto, there really is a lack of either high quality content that is just put in a way that's understandable. So most people read up until what they can understand and then they just drop off. Leaves a lot of really important information on the table. And then most of all, many times you don't know, especially on YouTube, especially on Twitter. And Twitter is right now, I don't even watch TV anymore because it's so entertaining. These influencers who have made millions shilling coins and pitching coins to their followers and then dumping it right after. Yeah, they're now sort of trying to wash their hands and they're calling each other out. It's one pure reality TV drama. It's wonderful. But I realized very quickly that that's been an issue for a while. And I wanted to provide information that was objective so that when we're giving it, it's not because there's a benefit to me because I own that or, we're looking for you to trade more. We wanted to do it in a way where everything was transparent. And it's been fun. It's been a great ride. In fact, the number of people who have come on board and who are coming to our site certainly have been surprising to me. It's a lot of people over the age of 40. So.
Oh, wow. Interesting. I love the idea. I mean, the reason why we started the Crypto Sheikhs was exactly the same. We wanted to educate people. Now, we never planned or intend to, set up a place where you can educate yourself. That's why, DChained is such a great place. Anyone that would like to, learn more about crypto, check this out, DChianed.com. the purpose of our podcast was very similar. We saw that there is a big problem in the market today with either miseducation or lack of education, and people just make investment decisions based on hearsay. And we wanted to create a platform for people to kind of learn how to do the research themselves.
It's sort of like a slot machine or craps table type mentality to investing. Don't you see? Don't you find that where people, when it comes to stocks, are very disciplined? They do their analysis, they do their research. In crypto, they're like, wait a second.
I'm just going to ape into this.
Yeah, there's a chicken egg avatar on Twitter that says I need to put $10,000 into this. I'm doing it.
Well, actually, I used to listen to a lot of frogs on Twitter. I'd take a lot of my advice from these frogs, and they gave the best advice. One of these frogs helped me 15x something. And, the truth is crypto is so volatile that what I also like about this, though, is another thing. It's the privacy aspect. These people who are, making these massive trades or also giving advice, whatever, on Twitter, the whole idea behind crypto is an element of privacy. The lack of the need to disclose who you are to government, and so that's also feeded into the NFT space now with the whole avatar kind of craze, which we can discuss later on. But I wanted to just pause there and actually go into your how it works. So the membership, maybe you could talk us through, how this sort of works.
Yeah, so we wanted to be able to provide value and information to all different investors across the spectrum. So if you're looking just to figure out, how do I even get started? How do I link my bank account to an exchange? And a lot of people, that sounds basic and simple, but a lot of people, when you start, that's a big problem. How do I do this? And who do I ask for help? So providing that education all the way to more advanced trading techniques and sort of everything in between. The other is many people, similar to if you've seen, Motley Fool or Zacks, Benzinga. These are websites where they give you the information, but sometimes people just want to look at, what do I buy? What should I get? So we have that element as well, where myself and a few of our members of our team are putting together. Here's our weekly and monthly recommendations that we put out there that ultimately can help provide suggestions in terms of what you might want to look at. And then sort of the last piece of this puzzle is, providing that human touch. One of the main challenges that I see out there, and there are great websites that offer phenomenal courses, none of which though offer you an ability to actually have that human interaction. So for us, what we wanted to do was host these workshops where it's not just me blabbing on and sort of talking, but me bringing in people who do this, professionally in other fields. So accountants who will talk about things you need to know when you're, trading and some tax implications, lawyers who are advising businesses who want to take crypto payments. So it sort of, we vary the topics, we hit different flavors of interest for our overall consumer base. And ultimately we want to make sure it's fun as well. Keeping up to date with crypto, because there's so many projects out there and it's a nonstop stream. It could be a full-time job. And we want to sort of do that legwork for a lot of these members and these people, even in our fund, where we're in it all day long. And ultimately let us keep you up to date, things that are important, those sound bites that you need to know today, and then let you move on with your day, because crypto doesn't need to be your life just because it's our life.
Awesome.
Very cool.
So for someone that's new to crypto, this is a great platform to get yourself educated. Now, a lot of people that are listening are probably thinking, well, Edmund, he has his own fund and he knows what to invest in. Would you be willing to share any insights and any key investment downloads for our listeners?
So I'm happy to do disclaimer. Nothing
Obviously, disclaimer here.
Nothing is financial advice. Obviously, I don't know anyone's.
You can say NFA, which is what CZ from Binance always says on his tweets. I don't know if any of you guys follow CZ from Binance. He'll make a massive statement and just be like NFA. and not
Yeah.
financial advice. It's so ubiquitous now. But yeah, don't
Yeah,
worry.
And what's funny is, and I'll share the recommendation in a second. What's funny is that if you're doing this here in the US and in Canada, that actually means nothing, which is so funny, because you host a website and you're giving financial advice and you're just saying at the end, this is not financial advice. It's sort of like being a robber breaking into a house and someone sitting up in bed and you say, don't worry, I'm not robbing your house. As you're filling your bag with their watches and jewelry, you're still doing that act, which is just funny. And that's why, for DChained, we're a registered investment advisor from a firm standpoint. So we have that legitimacy and that qualification. So that's important for people to know. Do you actually know what the hell you're talking about? And for us, we have smarter people than myself, sort of on our staff. But in terms of things that, I really like right now, and it sort of it's topical because, everything that's going on right now with China and China banning cryptocurrency in general, what we've seen is that a lot of those investors are now just going over to decentralized finance. They're going from Wobi or Binance or OKX, big exchanges either in China or around, the Chinese, circle, I should say. Hard to argue that Binance is not Chinese, even though who knows what their headquarters, because they keep claiming that their headquarters are incorporated in countries, and those countries come out and say, actually, we have no records of you. But they're going over to DeFi, and this is where there's been a lot of opportunity for people. And one of the opportunities that I've found to be phenomenal is Woo Network. So it's WOO. And the reason is not only do they run their own exchange, but they solve a huge issue that exists in overall crypto in general, which is liquidity. How much money lives on that platform, where if I trade one asset into another asset, there is minimal to no change in the price during that transaction. And it's hard to believe in many times that if you look at the vast majority of all liquidity, all money in crypto, it sits on, a select few Asian exchanges for the most part. So when you go to Coinbase or you go to FTX or any of these, they have a lot of liquidity, but ultimately what they need to do is they need to actually outsource a lot of that. And that's what Woo has been doing. And it went from doing, like, if you could scroll down, Anas, scroll up a little bit. So stop right here for a second. So for a very long time, up until like 2 weeks ago, it was stuck in this like $200 to $300 million 24-hour network volume. And over the last, and this is just, I believe, resetting, it's going to probably go up. In the last week, it's been clearing like 2.5 billion, almost 3 billion, which is mind blowing because that was almost double what FTX did. And I think these guys, and they were founded by a very large research and investment firm called Kronos. What they solved was, we're going to just be this pool that could provide liquidity to, Coinbase or to Uniswap or to anyone who needs it. And we'll take a little fee on it. So for you as a trader, it's free. These guys are just focused on big banks. So they don't make any money on your everyday retail investor. So I like the fact that they make zero, and I don't get paid by these guys. I don't have any association. I just love what their model is. So that would be my recommendation. WOO.
Very cool.
So how did you hear about it?
Going back to the thing, I'm a nerd. No, I heard about it because I was, fundraising, and I was speaking to a manager of a fund of funds. So this is a hedge fund that invests in other hedge funds, and this individual had a connection with someone on the Kronos team, and he had asked me, are you aware of this platform? And I did some digging, and I was like, wow, like I was blown away, because it's a pretty unique structure and sort of revenue model. So, and the fact that they're not trying to monetize on your average listener for this podcast. They're not trying to get your average person who's investing. They're looking to monetize, Bank of America and Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs.